So hello and welcome everyone as well who is tuning in from Austria now online. My name is Peter Pesel. I'm Head of Innovation at Advantage Austria UK, the österreichischen Außenwirtschaftscenter in London. And thank you very much for joining us at today's keynote talk, AI for Business. Just to give you a little bit of context why we are here and who is in this room. It's a room full of people, around 15 from Austria, representatives of various companies from different sectors, small, medium companies and large corporates. And for the next 2 days, we're going to look into how to bring AI into the companies, what we can expect over the next couple of years to come. And this is as part of a program that we call Learning Journey or Zukunftsreise. It's something we do a couple of times a year, and also our offices worldwide on a variety of topics. Everything from the future of hydrogen, mobility, healthcare, and so on. And this time we are focusing on AI for business. And as you can imagine, because also of the media, it's a very popular topic and a popular theme. So this in-person workshop, the Zukunftsreise, was sold out of a couple of days. So apologies for whoever was not able to take part in person, but there's a good side as well. We have already planned a follow-up event on a similar topic for March of next year. So you will receive an email afterwards, after this event, with all the information where you can log in. But for now, please also enjoy this keynote here. Please, if you have any questions, write them in the comment box and be active. And for today, this is the first event of this learning journey, the start of it, day number 1. And we wanted to start off with, of course, looking into the future. It's a learning journey, it's a future learning journey. And we have someone quite brilliant as a keynote speaker here with Daniel Hulme, who is CEO of various AI companies, one of them Satalia, which was bought by WPP, one of the largest marketing companies in the world right now, a few years ago, and where he is currently the Chief AI Officer. And he has multiple hats on. He is, an academic. He has been an academic and did his PhD and masters at UCL, University College of London. And he has this great oversight from various perspectives that he wants to, for the next 40-45 minutes, bring us closer to. And also, he's really one of the few people who do think about the future, who do think about what happens when AI agents become conscious, what happens when we live in a world of artificial general intelligence. So let's start this off with a very, very inspiring talk. I'm very much looking forward to it. And Daniel, I give the word.
All right. I do speak quickly, but my only superpower is to ask dumb questions, because I try to take this complexity of the world and simplify it enough for me to understand, and it turns out that's very useful for other people. So we're going to talk about AI. I'm going to give you a different framework to think about AI and how it applies to industry, and we'll also the macro impact that these technologies are going to have on society. So we're going to get quite philosophical towards the end. So we've already introduced me. I'm boring. So let's talk about AI. So for the past 10, 15 years, companies have been told to build data lakes, put Tableau or some sort of analytics layer on top, hire machine learning experts, data scientists, and the hope is that by extracting insights from data and giving those insights to human beings, that it'll lead to better decisions. If I'm honest with you, giving human beings better insights doesn't lead to better decisions. Companies don't have insight problems, they have decision problems. And decision making is a completely different field in computer science. If you're old enough, it used to be called operations research. It's discrete mathematics, it's optimization. Austria, very, very strong still in this area. In fact, I have a team in Austria, 15 people that build these types of algorithms. So what happens is we get very excited about emerging technology. 10 years ago, it was machine learning. Now it's generative AI. We then try and apply those technologies to solving the wrong problems. We blame the technology, but the reality is that humans are not really good at understanding what the right technologies are to solve the right problems. So today I'm going to give you a different way of thinking about how to do that properly. It turns out that humans are rubbish at making decisions. I don't know if you know that, but there's plenty of books out there that will convince you that humans are not very good at decision making. One of them is Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow. Daniel Kahneman argues that we have a fast brain and a slow brain, and there are parallels in terms of how our brains work with how AIs work, which I'll talk about later on. Ordinarily, if I had time, I'd ask you some maths questions, but I don't have time for that now, so I will ask you one maths question, which is, imagine you have a delivery van, and your delivery van has to deliver packages around these 24 points in London. Humans are quite good at solving these spatial problems. After a few minutes, we'll draw a nice path around those points. How long will it take a computer to get the shortest path, the one that's going to save the most amount of time, energy, petrol? Yeah, so milliseconds, somewhere between milliseconds and 20 billion years. So if you put 24 times 23 times 20, 24 factorial into your calculator, you get this number of routes. That's how many solutions there are around 24 points. If you had a computer that can check 1 million routes a second, it would take 20 billion years to go through all of them and say, this one that I looked at 10 billion years ago, this one's the shortest one, you should do that. If I had another point to the map, it becomes 25 times 20 billion years, or 5,000 billion years. If I had another point to the map, it becomes 26 times 5,000 billion years. So the point here is, if you choose the wrong algorithm, it will literally take 20 billion years to solve this problem. If you choose the right algorithm, it will take milliseconds. That is the opportunity cost in choosing the wrong algorithms. So one of my clients is Tesco. They're delivering to 200,000 points on a map today. 200,000 factorial. We don't have gazillions of years to solve that problem. We have seconds between each customer coming in to select a slot, optimizing those schedules so we can show more slots to the next customer. And actually, those algorithms were invented 12 years ago by some geniuses in Klagenfurt in Austria. So if I build a system that I give data to and it makes a decision, and tomorrow I give it the same data, it makes the same decision, what I have is automation. And automation is amazing because we can get computers to do things better than human beings. Does anybody know the definition of stupidity? Doing the same thing over again and expecting a different answer. I would controversially argue that by definition, automation is stupid. It's not AI. I know that everybody that currently touches these words calls themselves an AI company. It's fine. We get more clients. We get more funding. There are unfortunately many definitions of AI. The most popular definition is by far the weakest definition, which is getting computers to do things that humans can do. So 3 years ago, AI happened. ChatGPT can correspond in natural language. It can recognize objects and images. And when we get machines to behave like humans, and because humans are the most intelligent thing we know in the universe, we assume that that's intelligence. Now, again, there are plenty of books out there that will convince you that humans are not that intelligent. And actually, if I built a machine that could operate like a mouse, that would be the most intelligent machine that humanity has ever created. Benchmarking machines against humans is a very stupid thing to do. There's a much better definition of AI that comes from a definition of intelligence back in the 80s. So instead of using human beings as the pinnacle of intelligence, there's this very elegant definition, which is goal-directed adaptive behavior. So goal-directed in the sense we want to route our vehicles to maximize deliveries, we want to allocate our workforce to maximize happiness, we want to spend our marketing money to maximize return. You have to have a goal, and it's usually a complex goal you're trying to solve for. Behave is how well I can move towards that goal, and we've just discovered if you choose the wrong algorithm, the wrong method, it will literally take longer than the age of the universe. If you choose the right method, it will differentiate your business. But the key word in this definition is adaptive. What you want to do is build systems that make decisions, learn whether those decisions are good or bad, adapt themselves so next time they make better decisions. And if I'm being very controversial and honest with you all, you tend not to see adaptive systems in production. Almost everything in production at the moment is automation. The true paradigm of AI are systems that can safely adapt themselves in production. Actually, Google Hope, that's one of the first attempts at building systems that can learn and adapt. Building adaptive systems is the true pinnacle of AI, but building those systems is extremely hard. I think there's less than 5 companies in the world, including DeepMind, that know how to do this. So instead of looking at AI through definitions and through technologies, I look at AI in a different way. Before I do, I'm going to give you a different framework, a different history lesson. So this is AI in the 60s and 70s. This is Socrates. Socrates is famous for inspiring the Socratic method. If I say to you that Socrates is a man and that all men are mortal, I can infer that Socrates is immortal. I can create new knowledge that's never been created. AI in the 60s and 70s was writing down lots of things that we know about the world to try to infer new knowledge to make systems smarter. It didn't really work. It didn't really scale. This is now having a renaissance. It's called agentic computing. We'll talk about this later on. In the 80s and 90s, a new type of AI came along that's modeling how our brains work. So this is the brain of a bumblebee. My PhD 22 years ago was trying to model the brain of a bumblebee in a machine. Bumblebees have 1 million brain cells. Their brains can fit on the end of a needle. Bumblebees do amazing things. They navigate 3D worlds, they talk to each other, they solve problems, they don't handle windows very well, but ultimately they're very smart creatures. And the question was, can you model 1 million neurons in a machine? 20 years ago we couldn't, but we can now model billions of neurons. We currently call these large language models. Now, large language models are crude representations of our brain. We're going to talk about this later on, but they are very good. They're very good at knowing things about the world, and they're very good at telling you what they know about the world through imagery and text. They are not good at making predictions. They are not good at making complex decisions. They are not a panacea that's going to solve all of our problems. That said, they are getting smarter. So 10 years ago, large language models were a little bit like toddlers. They regurgitated some words, most of it didn't make sense. ChatGPT was launched 3 years ago. Arguably, ChatGPT is like an intoxicated graduate. 50% of what ChatGPT comes out with is confidently incorrect. That said, it is now moving to like a master's level where it can do rudimentary reasoning. Over the next few years, we're likely to achieve a PhD level where it can solve very complex problems. I think we'll also achieve, before this decade, a postdoc level, so something that can actually apply the scientific method to pushing the boundaries of human knowledge. And probably by the end of this decade, we'll have a professor in our pocket, something that can not only solve very complex problems, but can ask questions that humanity has never asked. It's important to understand that even a professor can't solve that optimization problem in its head. It can't solve that routing problem, just like humans can't. What it can do is it can either use an algorithm to solve the problem, or it can build an algorithm to solve the problem. It's really important to understand there are other algorithms out there beyond generative AI that are important to your business. So I look at the world not through definitions, but through applications. And I believe that there are all the frictions that we experience across our organizations, across your industries, can be mapped to one of these 6 applications. So I use this as a framework to think about how do I apply the right technology to solve that problem, rather than starting with the technology. So the first one actually is task automation. The fact is, if you use very simple algorithms, so macros, robotic process automation, if-then-else statements, you can replace a lot of repetitive, mundane structured tasks that human beings are doing. You don't need to gravitate to shiny technologies like machine learning, generative AI. The second category is content generation. So we all now have the ability to create any generic content with large language models, imagery, text, video, sound. This is cute, but it's not going to differentiate your business. The real battleground is creating brand-specific, production-grade, differentiated content. That's the battleground, and that last mile is extremely hard. So in WPP, we create ads, and so we call these things brand brains. A brand brain is trying to create production-grade, brand-specific content. And I'm going to geek out a second. It's very important to understand there are 4 ways of making an AI smart. The first way of making a brain smart is by asking it better questions. So we can all learn to prompt better. By better prompting, you get better answers, but it's only going to be bounded by the knowledge of that brain. The second way of making an intoxicated graduate smart is, in this case, you give it your brand guidelines, some written copy, some imagery, and you ask it to create an ad. And just like an intoxicated graduate, it will give you an ad that's 50% good. The third way of making a brain smart is taking that graduate and turning it into an expert. We know how long it takes humans to become experts. It takes years of trial and error, training, mentorship, blood, sweat, tears. In the AI world, it currently takes months to go from a graduate to an expert. And there are only some models you can actually tune and train. Most models you don't have that control over. When we create brand brains, we take an agentic approach. So just like the real world, you have an expert at your written copy, your imagery, your tone of voice, your company values, your brand guidelines. Just like in the real world, you have different experts that are collaborating and communicating to get to an answer greater than the sum of the parts. The power of agents isn't clicking on websites. The power of agents is a concept called multi-agent reasoning, which is getting these things to interact with each other and human beings to come up with solutions greater than the sum of the parts. That's the power of agents. The third category is human representation. So in a world where we can create content, the next question is, how do I know if that content is good? For the first time ever, we can build brains, audience brains, that are able to recreate how people think and feel about things. If I show you an ad or a policy or some promotional material, historically, I didn't know what goes in your mind and body unless I ask you, and people are not very good at reporting on what goes in their mind and body. For the first time ever, We can now build brains that recreate those signals. And we can use those signals to create better content, but also accurately predict activation. Will this lead to the right clicks and sales? And unlike brand brains, where the complexity is how you tune and train and pipeline these technologies, the differentiator for audience brains is data. If you have data that contains insights about human behavior that's more useful than your competitors, then you have an advantage. So I think this is a differentiator. In fact, actually, AI is getting very good at understanding what people value. So this is a paper from 2016, Harvard Business Review paper. Somebody mapped 30 things that consumers value to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So let me ask you a question. What brand do you think about if I say safe cars? What about extreme sports? Nike? Red Bull? Yeah. What about, this is a tricky one, Christmas? Coca-Cola, okay. So what I'm doing is I'm activating some neurons in your brain. You have no choice but to say those words. That's coming from your unconscious. And the goal of marketing is actually to reinforce these values with brands. And that's a creative process. It's not an easy process. The fourth category is what people called AI before generative AI 4 years ago, machine learning. You already know my opinion. Giving human beings better insights doesn't always lead to better decisions. The power of machine learning is not making predictions. The power of machine learning is explaining those predictions. So if I show you an ad with a black cat, I can predict the clicks and the likes and the sales. But machine learning can say, Daniel, if you change that from a black cat to a ginger cat, you're going to get more clicks, likes, and sales because that person likes Garfield. It's a terrible example. I need a better example. But the point is that machine learning can give insights that can help you ultimately make better decisions. We've already talked about complex decision making. I really want to emphasize this because I think that you get the biggest bang for your buck if you apply these algorithms to solve your problems first. And these algorithms have been around for the past 30 or 40 years. So let's just remind ourselves how complicated problems are. Imagine you have 5 staff members, so 5 employees that you need to allocate to 5 jobs. Let's remind ourselves, how many possible solutions are there to allocate 5 people to 5 jobs? 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. It's 120 possible solutions. Let's make the problem a little bit more complicated. I've got 15 staff members, 15 people to allocate to 15 jobs. How many possible solutions are there? Don't say 15 factorial, that's cheating. It's over 1 trillion possible solutions. So one thing to take away today, anything more than 7, don't use a human for. You have lots of these problems in your organizations. They're either being solved by human beings very badly, or they're probably being solved by algorithms very badly. And actually, industry have problems of this size. So here are 500 staff members. Can you tell me how many solutions are? No, you can't. It's a big number. It's a number that's got over 1,000 digits. And just to put this number into context, this is how many atoms there are in the universe. Once you reach about 60 things you have to consider, in this case 60 people, there are more solutions than there are atoms in the universe, which is why using the right algorithms to find the solution is important. The final category is human augmentation. So a few years ago, I would be talking about how we can use exoskeletons and cybernetics to make ourselves faster, better, stronger. One of the things that's very exciting is that humans are now using their AIs, their personal AIs, primarily as therapists. So you're telling it your hopes, your dreams, your desires, your concerns, your preferences. At some point, you will give agency to your AI. You'll give it the ability to make purchasing decisions or recommendations. And so the marketing community now need to figure out, how do we market not just to human beings, but how do we now market to billions of agents? And by the way, those agents are going to be much more rational at purchasing things than human beings. So they're going to actually hold companies account to ensuring that the products that they're creating actually deliver the value that they claim, and the purpose of the company is actually making the world better. So AI is going to help companies hold these things to account. So I love these categories because they also help you navigate this complex world of AI safety, security, ethics, governance. There's a huge amount of scaremongering, misunderstanding associated with these words. When I implement AI, I ask myself 3 questions. The first question is the intent appropriate? Now, you don't need an AI ethics committee to solve that problem. There are already structures and processes set up to scrutinize intent. The difference between human beings and AIs don't have intent. Human beings have intent, and that's what needs to be looked at. The second question is, are my algorithms explainable? Okay, so if you can make your algorithms explainable, most of these words go away. They become transparent, auditable, responsible. Explainability is your key problem to solve. And the final question is a strange one. It's not what happens if my AI goes wrong. As engineers, when we build systems, software, we think about the failure points and we try to mitigate those risks. You now need to ask yourself, what happens if my AI goes very right? For the first time ever, AI can overachieve the goal that we've given it, and it can actually then start to cause harm elsewhere in the supply chain. You have to think about the consequences of AI going very right. I can give you lots of examples where that's happened. Okay, so this is boring. This is we'll talk about that later. So these are the reasons why companies get it right. So and I won't dwell on this because I want to actually focus on where companies get it wrong, because that's what happens 99% of the time. So these are for me the 4 red flags. The first one is if you've never built and scaled software in your organization, you're going to find it very hard to build and scale AI. Okay, I know we all think that we can now build software, but the reality is that 80% of building software is testing, and it's this is the first. The second one is, look, we all want to build careers around AI. It's a very a fashionable job title. So we ask our CEO for some budget to hire some AI experts. The reality is most organizations can't attract and retain AI talent. Their deep mind talent are very, very hard to attract. They demand £1 million salaries. And so the best thing you can do is hire a group of savvy technologists that can understand your domain and then work with deep domain experts, deep AI experts to then innovate. We're all still waiting to get our data in order. 15 years later, our data is still not in order. Your data will never be in order. Start with your problem and work backwards. Don't start with your data and work up. And then I'm guilty of this. Let's focus on the quick wins and the low-hanging fruit. The reality is that quick wins and low-hanging fruit are not going to differentiate your business. They're often productivity problems that you're trying to solve for. The reality is that most of the productivity problems will be solved by a third-party vendor, or Microsoft or Google. You need to focus on applying AI to solving problems that are going to differentiate your business compared to your competitors, and they are not quick and they are not easy. Okay? So the promise of AI is not just to solve problems across your supply chain. The promise of AI is to create what we call a digital twin of your organization. If I go to a retailer now and say, look, I'm going to run a marketing campaign that's going to increase demand by 10%. Can you tell me, will your suppliers default on their supply? Do you have enough space in your warehouses? Do you have enough distribution drivers? Do you have enough people in your stores to fulfill that promise to the customer? Most organizations can't project these questions across their supply chain. Their supply chains are siloed. The promise of AI is to create connected supply chains, but you need to have somebody that's responsible that sits across all of them. I think there are 3 digital twins you need to create. One is the flow of goods across your supply chain. The second one is back office processes. We all have them: hiring, firing, onboarding, expenses. We all know back office processes are bureaucratic. They are a hindrance to innovation. AI is not only making them more efficient, they're changing the way that we do back office processes. So Gore-Tex, the clothing company, instead of having a complex a bureaucratic expense policy, they let people expense whatever they want, but all of their expenses are publicly available. And what happens is that people self-police each other, which is a much more effective, much more humane way of doing expenses. And finally, it's your workforce. It's understanding people's hopes, dreams, desires, career development, aspirations, to make sure they're being allocated to work in a much more effective way. I want to double click on this because it's really important. I'm sure you don't have any problems like this in your organization, but this is a hierarchy, and hierarchies breed certain types of interesting relationships. This is not a picture of my company, although most people do sell drugs to each other. That's quite common in my company. This is not a conducive structure for innovation. Remember, the more quickly you can innovate, the more adaptive you are, the more intelligent you are. So organizations are embracing more complex methodologies, agile, scrum, design thinking. The principle behind these methodologies is to enable your organization to innovate. The more innovative you are, the more intelligent you are. I don't know what's going on. So this is a picture of my company 10 years ago. So we used people's digital footprint to understand their skills, their influence, their relationships. I can see if one of these 2 people leave. I get a silo, so I need to backfill that risk. I can identify secret lovers in my company. I can identify people who are going to leave the company before they know they're going to leave the company. So it does raise lots of interesting ethical questions. But the point here is that you want to use these technologies to understand how to allocate your workforce in a more effective way. Okay, we'll talk about this very quickly. So one of the things that I used to do before I realized it was illegal is that we used to get everybody in my company to make public recommendations for their salary. So everybody would publicly declare what they wanted to be paid, including me, and then people would then vote on whether those salaries should be reduced or increased or kept the same. And we would use AI to determine how many votes one person has for another. So if I've worked very closely with you over the past year, if I'm very knowledgeable about your domain, I will have more votes for your salary than somebody else. Now, I know it sounds crazy, but what you're trying to do, what you're trying to solve for is how do I get the best diverse group of experts to solve the problem? Hierarchies are a crude mechanism to do this. What AI is enabling is a concept called liquid organizations, where we can identify the best diverse group of humans and AI agents to swarm around the problem. So I've talked a little bit about innovation. I love Steve Jobs' definition of innovation. Steve Jobs said, innovation is creativity that ships. And for me, the most important word in that definition is the word that. That's my job, which is taking ideas and getting to the point where somebody's willing to pay for them. That process, as we all know, is full of frictions and challenges. How do we use AI to remove those frictions to allow us to innovate more quickly? And I think there are three things that a company needs to survive in the world of AI. The first one is data. If you have data that contains more useful insights than your competitors, then you have an advantage. It's data that makes the AI smart. If you don't, then you're going to have to come up with a business model that captures that market in a different way. The second is AI talent. Look, there are people that have rebranded themselves as AI experts over the past 3 years, but if you genuinely want to build differentiated AI solutions, then you need to engage with differentiated talent. So, as I said, those algorithms that we built for Tesco were developed in academia in Klagenfurt over like a 30-year period. Building differentiated solutions is not easy. And finally, it's you. Right? If you don't understand about the transformational power of these technologies, if you place the wrong bets, then you're going to fail. We can't afford over the next 5 years for leaders to get seduced by the hype and place the wrong bets. Okay, start with the problem and work backwards. So we know that AI is moving from the sort of static world to agents. Agents have the ability to interact with each other and interact with systems. Those agents will eventually move to the physical world, robots. So we are going to spawn the robotic revolution. Now, we all know the rhetoric. Large language models are horrendously energy inefficient. They learn very slowly. They're not adaptive at all. They require lots of data to learn. Large language models are crude representations of your brain. Your brain does not need a nuclear power station to run. Your brain operates on the power of a light bulb. There are many innovations that are being developed in academia, broadly called neuromorphics. Neuromorphics are essentially looking at how biological brains work and then using those to inspire how we build much more adaptive, much more energy efficient AIs. I think the challenges around energy efficiency, the challenges around data are going to go away over the next 3 years. So again, you don't need to be investing in nuclear power stations and massive data centers. When we start to build brains, or AI brains that are more biological, I think a superpower is going to be neuroscience. Understanding how brains perceive things, human brains, AI brains, understanding how to influence brains is going to be a very, very important superpower. Okay, let's talk about the end of the world. So you might have all heard the word singularity. Singularity comes from physics, actually. It's a point in time and space that we can't see beyond. And it was adopted by the AI community to refer to the technological singularity, which is the point in time where we build a brain 1 million times smarter than us. So you might have done a business degree, so you might have come across a pest analysis, political, economic, social technology. So pest analysis got extended to pestle, and then it got extended to steeple. So I think there's actually a steeple of singularities. So there's 7 big macro questions that we're facing as a species. The first one is the social singularity. So this is not my expertise, but there are scientists that believe that there are people alive today that don't have to die. AI is advancing medicine. DeepMind is doing this. It's able to monitor ourselves and clean ourselves out. And a bit like a car, if you stay on top of damage, the car will never, ever die. The car will never, ever break down. And I don't know what the world will look like when we realize there are people amongst us that won't have to die. In fact, I just signed up to a website recently called tomorrow.bio. So for $5 a week, what will happen is if I die now, which is quite possible, somebody will collect me and they'll take me to Sweden and freeze me. They don't know how to unfreeze me yet, but the point is for $5 a week, you could all potentially cheat death. The second is the technological singularity. So this is the point in time where we build a machine smarter than us, and we become the second most intelligent species on the planet. Now, my community felt this wasn't going to happen for another 40 years. We think it might now happen in the next 5 or 10 years. And my advice to people is that when superintelligence comes, look busy, be nice to each other, and hopefully it will bugger off to a different dimension. Hopefully it won't take all of our resources with it. I am a little bit worried about the singularity, and so I did start a company recently that's a spin-out of WPP to try to solve machine consciousness. The question is, should we build a machine that is conscious, and would a conscious superintelligence be safer for humanity than a zombie superintelligence? Would something that can empathize, that can feel pain, love, suffering, that understands the value of consciousness in the same way that we understand the value of consciousness, will it actually be safer for humanity than a zombie superintelligence? So that leads me on to the ethical singularity. So, you know, that 60% of the population currently believe that large language models are conscious. People are building relationships with them, they're becoming dependent upon them. I would argue that they're not conscious. We can talk about this later on if you want. But there is a dotted line to building machines that could become conscious. And there's a concept called mind crime, which is if we build machines that are conscious and don't realize it, we could be putting them in horrendous situations. We could be committing mass torture. We actually now have a duty of care, not just to ourselves and to animals, but we potentially now have a duty of care to AIs and protecting their suffering. The environmental singularity, look, you're all familiar with. AI is increasing consumption. You know, consumption, as far as I'm concerned, typically gives people access to goods and services that enrich their lives. We know it's putting pressure on our planetary boundaries. We know there are people that overconsume. But I know for a fact that if we apply AI in the right way across our supply chain, we could easily halve the amount of energy that we need to run this planet, easily. Right? Every project that I've done over the past 18 years, we typically reduce the amount of carbon by 25% and unlock way more capacity. If you apply AI to optimize our supply chains, we could get control of our ecosystem. Arguably, we're already living in this singularity, but the political singularity is a post-truth world, a world where we no longer know what is true. AI, misinformation bots, deepfakes have challenged our political foundations, but they're also now challenging the fabric of our reality. So with a few dollars and a few samples of your voice and imagery, I can clone you. And I know people who are being cloned, and the clone is being used to commit fraud. In fact, social engineering used by AI is going to be a big problem to solve for over the next 5 years. So cybersecurity, whoever's in that's going to be a fun period. The legal singularity is when surveillance becomes ubiquitous. So I guess what I'm saying here is that AI is getting very good at understanding how people perceive things. It's also getting very good at how to influence people. And we need to make sure, obviously, we're using these technologies safely and responsibly, but we also need to prevent bad actors from using these technologies to accumulate more wealth and more power. The final singularity, I'm nearly done, is my favorite singularity. I can't talk about AI without talking about its impact on jobs. So this was actually coined by a very good friend of mine called Callum Chase. I'd highly recommend his books. Callum's been thinking about this for a long time. So for the past 18 years, I've been building AI solutions that have been freeing people from mundane tasks. They've not lost their jobs. They've gone on to do more important, more impactful, more valuable things. I think that at least for the next 5 years, we're going to see a Cambrian explosion of new innovations. These technologies are going to allow us to create companies. Those companies will disrupt jobs and displace jobs, but I think our economies are going to grow. It's like a new energy source. Beyond 5 years, I don't think anybody knows what they're talking about. Okay? And to give you the two extremes of the argument, the one extreme of the argument is that when we can free up whole jobs with AI, we probably will. The capitalistic model to reduce costs, increase profits means we'll stop hiring or we'll remove jobs. If that happens very quickly and lots, then our economies won't be able to rebalance fast enough and it could lead to social unrest. I actually think that governments have a real responsibility to think about 4-day working week, UBI. We need some mechanisms to mitigate the risk of technological unemployment. The counter-argument to this is that by removing friction, which usually means human labour, from the creation and dissemination of goods, you can bring the cost of those goods down so much that they become free. So imagine being born into a world where you don't have access to paid work, but everything you need to survive and thrive as a human is abundant. Your food, your healthcare, your energy, your transport, your education, it's all free. I'm not talking about taxing rich people and giving it to poor people. I'm talking about using our intelligence to reduce the cost of the creation and dissemination of these goods so much that they become abundant. So people say to me, Daniel, what would I do if I didn't have a job? A job defines who I am as a human being. I know lots of people, maybe you do too, who don't have jobs. They become economically free. Most of the sane ones are not sitting at home bored and depressed. Most of them are trying to use their time and their assets to make some sort of contribution to humanity. So I'm going to ask you all a question. I know it's early, but what would you do if you were economically free and everything you needed to survive and thrive as a human was abundant? What would you do with your time? Golf is usually the first answer, I guess. So what else would you do? Same. If you're lucky, you say the same thing. What would you do?
Yeah, same thing for half the day.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah. What else? So people usually say that travel, indulge in their hobbies, spend more time with their friends and family, look after their health. If you push people hard enough, they say the same thing, which is, I want to do something that makes some sort of contribution to humanity. I think that we are all born into economic constraints, preventing us from what I would argue is to live our true humanity. Which is not just living for ourselves, but to live for human beings. So I'm going to close by saying it's not good enough for organizations just to have a strong, profitable business. You need to have a purpose. If you don't have a purpose, you're definitely not going to attract AI talent, even as contractors, because that talent want to work on purposeful things. But you're also probably not going to attract AI purchasers. Those AIs will be purchasing from you based on you evidencing that you are achieving your purpose. I joined WPP despite knowing nothing about marketing, and I still like to claim I know nothing about marketing because it allows me to ask dumb questions. But I joined them because I believe in their purpose. It's to use the power of creativity, human creativity, to make the world better. And I think a better world is a world where everybody is economically free to contribute however they want. Now, people often accuse me of trying to paint a picture of a utopia. Nobody would agree on what a utopia is. We might agree on what a dystopia is. There's a concept that I need you to remember called a protopia, which is a system that is incrementally getting better. And for me, that system is a system where we're using technology to create innovations that reduce the cost of goods, that make them more abundant, that free people from their economically, to allow them to use these innovations to free more people from their economic constraints. There is this system that I think, if we get the timing right, could lead to a world of abundance. So I think on that note, I'm going to open to questions. Is that okay? Thank you for listening. Thank you. Yep, thank you. No, that's very kind.
Starting off, any questions from here?
Don't be shy. I've had every question you can imagine. Yes.
If you go back to the slide with the
Singularities, yes, yeah.
I mean, the political one is already here, right?
Arguably it is. I actually think we can mitigate this. So actually, I think that, so one of the things that we're doing in WPP, sorry to interrupt, but we obviously create content. We create ads, promotion materials, and I've already told you about this concept called audience brains, where you can build synthetic audiences and you can test whether that content will resonate with that audience. What's interesting is that you can actually create brains that represent every corner of society. You can build a brain that represents the LGBTQ community, a political party, a newspaper, even things like legal claims like ad compliance claims, food compliance claims, sustainability compliance claims. You can build these brains that represent every corner of society. So when we create content, whether it be an ad or a tweet or a newspaper article, what we could do is we could show it to those thousands of representatives and identify whether it's going to trigger any communities, cause any harm, break any laws. And I would argue that if it reached a certain threshold of it being problematic, it needs to be authenticated before it even goes out there. Historically, the problem with Facebook and Twitter is that people and bots can send content out there without it being moderated. In theory, what we could do is we could actually use AI to moderate content to then check for its authenticity. I'm not saying we stop content going out there, but we moderate it and we check for authenticity before we let it go out there. So we can actually start to actually challenge this problem of a post-truth world. Sorry, I interrupted you, but I didn't. Did you have a question? Yeah.
Basically, I just wanted to know if you see it the same way.
Yeah.
This time has already come.
Do you know what? It's interesting that because people are not sure now whether what they're seeing is authentic or not. Instead of just believing it by default, they tend to now be questioning it. Or at least, sane people, the people I spend a lot of my time with. I appreciate there are people out there that might just accept what they're seeing, but I think it could actually have the opposite effect, which is actually, I don't know if this is true, and I'm not actually going to even believe it unless I go and test for authenticity. Yeah, let's see. Any other questions?
One note as well. We had Black Friday last Friday.
Yeah.
And I think I read the stat that $3 billion out of this $14 billion of purchasing have been influenced by AI and AI agents. So how, maybe as a company, how would you go on to position yourself that you'd be seen by an AI agent or the AI?
Sure.
How do you feed it into?
There are two problems to solve here. One is a concept called generative search optimization. So it used to be SEO, which was how do I put content on my website to make sure it gets shown up in Google algorithms. And 20 years ago, you were able to game Google. You were able to put like white words on a white background, and it meant that your content would show up more. Now Google just says, look, our algorithm is so complex. The best thing for you to do is to create content that resonates with your buyers. That's the best thing you can do. With generative AI, arguably, so when you go and ask, Google a question, it produces now an AI summary. The question is, how do I make sure that my brand gets shown up in that output? And the reality is that a lot of that data is coming from Reddit and some other sources. So if you put data in those sources, then you're more likely to show up. That will evolve over the next several years. And again, I would argue the best way for your brand to get shown up by generative AI is just to make sure that you're creating good content. And by the way, again, if I ask, there's a lot of excitement around personalization at the moment, around using AI to personalize ads. If I asked you what ads do you remember, they probably weren't personalized ads. They were ads that maybe never even mentioned the brand. They just connected you emotionally to some community, some moment in time. And actually coming up with content is still very much in the realm of human beings, that type of content. Content that's going to touch your heart, that requires empathy and macro thinking and comedic misdirection. You can use AI to help navigate that space, but it's still very much in the realm of human beings. So I think creativity, going back to your job, is going to become a premium. How do you actually come up with content that connects people? So the first problem is, what information do I need to put on the internet to make sure that I'm being shown up in the output of generative AIs? This will evolve over the next several years. WPP have lots of thinking around that. Happy to talk to you about that. The second is AI agents. So how do I make sure that my AI agent is going to buy from this brand instead of this brand? Now, what we're doing in WPP is actually we're building replicas of your agents. So we have some sort of hypothesis in terms of what AIs you're using and what data you're giving it. So we can actually start to build representatives of your agent as buyers. And then we can start to see how they might be activated. But the reality is that you need to make sure as a brand that you are creating goods that actually provide the value to your customers, makes them safer and warmer and happier, and as a purpose, you are achieving your purpose. You're making the world better. So I buy from Patagonia not just because their clothes make me warm and dry, but I buy from Patagonia because they're locally sourced and they're sustainable. And it's those two things you're going to have to start to evidence, which I think is very exciting. Yeah.
Solve I mean, all the billions being spent.
Yeah.
How come?
So as I said, these concepts called neuromorphics are hundreds, thousands, potentially even hundreds of thousands of times more energy efficient than large language models. Large language models multiply numbers together. That's why GPUs are very expensive right now, is because that they're really good at multiplying numbers together. Your brain doesn't multiply numbers together. Your brain spikes. And there are only some parts of your brain that are activated at one time. So and those spikes spike in different frequencies, they interact in different ways. And so what you can do is you can actually encapsulate a lot more information in a lot smaller set of neurons. And so what we're looking at is how can we leverage the efficiencies that our brain have evolved in AIs. I would also say that there's going to be, over the next 5 years, probably breakthroughs in quantum. There was already starting to be some talk about that. Quantum is not a competitor to AI. It's just an accelerator. It's just a different compute layer. And also, there's talk around how we might be able to solve fusion. There's a book called Genesis, written by Craig Mundy and Eric Schmidt and somebody else I can't remember. And they argue that over the next 5 years, we're going to achieve AGI, so a machine that's as smart as all humans. We may have achieved quantum in 5 years, and we may have also solved nuclear fusion. Infinite intelligence, infinite energy, infinite compute in 5 years' time, which is why I don't think anybody knows what the world looks like beyond that time, beyond 5 years. Yep.
I just want to get back
Yes, yeah.
With what you mentioned also with the leadership with purpose, are people who have really done so much money that they can really focus.
Yeah, okay.
Is this, do you see this more as a European topic, or is it?
That's a great question. Most of the people I know that have become economically free, I think most of them are Europeans, and again, most of the ones that don't have massive traumas as infants means that they are not wanting to buy a gold-plated Lamborghini. They're wanting to actually make some sort of positive contribution to the world. And people challenge me on this all the time. What about people that people always want to overconsume? The reality is that once you reach a certain amount of stuff, and we all hear this on the internet, once you reach a certain amount of stuff, having more stuff becomes a burden. Having an extra bedroom, an extra car, it becomes a burden. And what people realize that once they've got a certain amount of stuff, what matters is your health, human connection, authentic experiences. Unless you are a bit dysfunctional and you just want a gold-plated Lamborghini. But I think those are far and few between. And by the way, if people people say, well, how will people find purpose in that world? There'll always be scarcity. There'll always be people that you will love that don't love you back. If we all had a helicopter, we'd be arguing who leaves first. Time and space is scarce. There are more people playing chess today than ever before, even though computers can beat us at chess for the past 30 years. There'll always be scarcity and competition. And I would also argue that if we make things more abundant, people would commit less crime. Because I think people don't commit crime because it's fun. They commit crime because they need to feed their family. And people will say, what about government leaders that are trying to control people? Well, if you don't have any economic constraints, if you have access to food and healthcare, education, what power do those leaders have over you? They have no power over you. So unless somebody can convince me otherwise of a different system, that's the thing that I'm focusing on. How do we free people economically to allow them to apply their own humanity to making the world better?
And maybe this is a good closing point as well for at least our audience as well. Thank you very much also for everyone tuning in. Thank you, Daniel, for amazing insights here. I'm sure there's going to be one or two more questions coming up now off the record. But thanks very much. You will all receive an email with more resources, more information as well on our future events that we are planning, also our next iteration on the learning journey on AI for business. And thanks a lot for tuning in, and we wish you all a good day from London.